Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Pulp Crazy. I'm your host, Jason Aiken. In this week's episode, I will be discussing a movie based on a pulp character. Actually, he's probably the most well-known pulp character of them all, Tarzan. The title of the film is Greystoke, The Legend of Tarzan, Lord of the Apes. It's quite a mouthful, but I generally hear this film referred to as simply Greystoke. The film was released on March 30th, 1984, and is based on the novel Tarzan of the Apes by Edgar Rice Burroughs. The film was directed by Hugh Hudson, who is best known for directing Chariots of Fire. Greystoke stars Christopher Lambert as Tarzan, although he is never referred to by this name during the actual film. He is called John, Johnny, or Lord Greystoke. Andie MacDowell plays Jane Porter, and Ian Holm is Philippe D'Arnot. Sir Ralph Richardson played the Earl of Greystoke, Tarzan's grandfather. While the film is not 100% faithful to the original novel, I believe the spirit of Tarzan was captured in this movie. If you know the story of Tarzan, then you pretty much get the gist of what will happen in this film. I'll hit the high points and discuss the pros and cons of the film. So spoilers are incoming, but like I said, if you know the story of Tarzan, nothing should be a real surprise here for you. Tarzan's parents are marooned in Africa after their ship is battered in a storm. It is there Tarzan is born. He and his parents are together for a very short time, before his mother passes away and his father is killed by a violent Mangani. The Mangani are a species of great apes that Burroughs created. Luckily for the infant Tarzan, he is taken in by a Mangani named Kala, and he's raised as one of them. Kala is his foster mother. Years pass, and a team of British explorers, led by their Belgian guide, Philippe D'Arnot, are attacked by natives. D'Arnot is the sole survivor of the attack, thanks to the intervention of a now adult Tarzan. Tarzan treats D'Arnot's wounds, and D'Arnot begins to educate Tarzan on how to be a man. Tarzan leaves the Mangani, and he and D'Arnot eventually make their way back to civilization, and Tarzan returns home to his family's estate in what is Scotland in this film. At the estate, he spends time with his grandfather and Jane Porter, but he never feels like he truly belongs there. Following the death of his grandfather and a traumatic experience at the British Museum, he returns to Africa. Jane and D'Arnot travel there with him and watch him vanish into the jungle. Now, I think this film has a lot of good things going for it. First off, this is a very well-made film as far as the visuals go. The director and cinematographer did a phenomenal job on this, especially on the scenes focusing on Tarzan and his time with the Mangani. There's a real beautiful, almost mythological aspect to these scenes in the jungle. I also think the Mangani themselves are very well done. They don't look like gorillas, and they are far too large to be chimpanzees. They are a unique, ambiguous species that are in the spirit of what Burroughs described in the books. The craftsmen that fabricated these suits, and the actors in the suits, were very talented. The suit actors did an amazing job, not only with their actions and stunt work when interacting with Tarzan, but the emotions that showed through the eyes of the apes. I thought that was very powerful, especially with the scenes featuring Kala and Tarzan. The suit actors aren't the only thespians that deserve praise for their performances, though. The lead characters, I felt, did a really good job, but especially Christopher Lambert. I know he's the lead actor, but he really did steal the show here. In a way, he actually plays three different characters, or rather three different stages of the same character. He plays Tarzan as a feral man in the jungle prior to meeting D'Arnot. He then plays Tarzan as a feral man who is learning the ways of civilization while he is spending time and traveling with D'Arnot. And finally, he plays a nearly civilized peer of the realm who is wrestling with the beast within him once he reaches his family's estate. I really enjoyed this portrayal of Tarzan. It was especially touching that Tarzan kept referring to his mother as Kala. I thought that was a nice callback to the closing line of the original novel, where he says that his mother was an ape. Another plus was that Tarzan was portrayed as an intelligent person. This isn't the grunting, broken English brute of the Johnny Weissmuller films. The portrayal in Greystoke is closer to how Burroughs portrayed him in the books, but this is done from a more realistic perspective psychologically in the film. Another aspect of the original novel that I enjoyed seeing in the movie was the Mangani having some type of language. In the movie, the language isn't very complex, and it's not like they're chatting away, but they're at least communicating verbally, it seems, although it's quite limited. I also enjoyed seeing a hint of Philip Jose Farmer's work show up in the film, in the form of Tarzan being a natural mimic when it comes to sounds. This includes speech, a person's individual voice, accents, and animal sounds. This is shown in the film when D'Arnot is teaching Tarzan how to speak, and when Tarzan entertains dinner guests at the estate with his mimicry. To my knowledge, Farmer is the first person to propose this theory. Farmer first postulated this idea in 1973 in an exclusive interview with Lord Greystoke, which was published in the book of Philip Jose Farmer. This article was written as if Farmer was actually conducting an interview with the Jungle Lord. Farmer's theory was repeated once again in 1974 in Extracts from the Memoirs of Lord Greystoke. Farmer wrote this article as if it was a part of the actual memoirs written by Tarzan. This article was published in Mother Was a Lovely Beast, a feral human anthology that Farmer edited. As a matter of fact, some of the images with Kala and the infant Tarzan in the Greystoke film are reminiscent of the cover to Mother Was a Lovely Beast. The interview and memoirs tie into Farmer's speculation that Tarzan was a real person, which Farmer covered in length in his mock biography, Tarzan Alive. An exclusive interview with Lord Greystoke and Extracts from the Memoirs of Lord Greystoke were both reprinted in the Bison Books edition of Tarzan Alive in 2006, which is a definitive edition of Tarzan Alive at the moment. I also enjoyed how Tarzan's appearance during portions of the jungle scenes in the movie were very close to how he is depicted on the cover of the October 1912 issue of All Story magazine. This was his first appearance. On the cover, he is shown wearing a bandana, his mother's locket, and having a quiver of arrows on his back. He's in the act of killing a lion with his father's hunting knife. In the movie, he wears a bandana, his mother's locket, and uses his father's knife. He doesn't have arrows in the movie. And while he doesn't kill a lion in the film, he does kill a panther. This makes sense, as lions are predators of the savanna, and not typically found in the rainforest or the jungle. The filmmakers clearly put a lot of thought and research into this depiction of Tarzan. Their attention to detail in regards to Tarzan and the Mangani and Lambert's portrayal of Tarzan stick out in my mind as my favorite parts of the film. I think they really made the movie. With all that being said, this is not a perfect film. I believe it does have a few flaws. For one, I feel the story suffered upon Tarzan's time at his family's estate in Scotland, mostly due to there being no physical conflict on the horizon for him to deal with. I'll be honest, I thought for sure the goons who D'Arnot and Tarzan encountered in that African village would come to Scotland to take their revenge on them for burning down their building. But as time passed, it appeared that the conflict in the story would be mental rather than physical. The conflict was Tarzan struggling to find his place in civilization and coming to grips with his own identity. And while I did enjoy the moments with him and his grandfather, especially the fishing scene, I can't say I enjoyed the rest of the scenes on the estate very much. Even the love story with Jane didn't really hit home for me the way it did in the original novel. The rest of the characters and events that took place on the estate weren't boring by any means, but there wasn't a whole lot that moved the story along there. The end was pretty much in sight as soon as Tarzan arrived on the estate, in my eyes. And while it was an interesting idea to use the trip to the museum to set Tarzan off the deep end, so to speak, this was done by him seeing former denizens of the jungle on display in the museum, but what really put him over the edge was when he stumbled onto his foster father being held captive, along with other specimens. And this really set him into like a full-blown feral state. It was interesting, but in my mind it took just way too much time at the estate to get us to that point at the museum. Now, Greystoke was met with some critical acclaim at the time of its release. It was nominated for 3 Academy Awards in 1985, which are also known as Oscars. It appears that the writer of the film, Robert Towne, was supposed to direct this movie as well. However, after his directorial debut bombed, he wasn't allowed to direct this. In protest, he decided to take the screenwriting credit under the name P.H. Vazak, which was the name of his dog. This is pretty funny, as his script was nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay. Sir Ralph Richardson, who played Tarzan's grandfather, died shortly after the film was made. He was nominated for a posthumous Best Supporting Actor, and the film is dedicated in his memory. And the work on the Mangani clearly did not go unnoticed, as the film was nominated for Best Makeup as well. An interesting bit of trivia is that Andie MacDowell's lines were actually dubbed over by Glenn Close. This was due to MacDowell's southern accent apparently not suiting the character. I have to admit, I didn't notice the dubbing at all when I watched this. Then again, I don't think I've seen more than a handful of Glenn Close and Andie MacDowell movies combined in my lifetime. Overall, I found Greystoke to be quite enjoyable, especially the early jungle scenes with the Mangani. The movie moves kind of slow once Tarzan comes to the estate, but if you're into psychological stuff, I think you'll enjoy those scenes too. I believe the film is out on Blu-ray, but I just watched it on DVD. I'm sure you can't go wrong with either format, and it isn't that expensive. I would recommend this movie to any Tarzan fan out there. From what I hear, this film and the New Adventures of Tarzan film serial from 1935 come the closest to capturing Edgar Rice Burroughs as Tarzan. These two are really the only Tarzan films I've seen, so I have to take the rest of fandom's word on that. I'm curious to check out the Gordon Scott Tarzan films though, as I've heard they weren't bad. I also heard good things about the Casper Van Dien film, so I'll be sure to check that out as well. Well, that's it for this week's episode. Pulp Crazy is located at pulpcrazy.com. I'm at Pulp Crazy on Twitter and facebook.com/pulpcrazy. You can also email me at pulpcrazy@gmail.com. My YouTube channel is youtube.com/pulpcast. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.